Alright, so this is how you can do a Binda Former catapult. So I've got some basic parts of my really simple catapult model going on here. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my base, and I'm just going to go to Mesh and Combine. So I'm just going to make all this one model, change that to cat base, and then we'll have a bucket right here and a beam for the arm. And then what I'm going to do is attach these. So I'm going to move and do a D shift to move the position here. And then if you look on this one, we have a center vert. So I'm just going to hold down V and then snap that to right there. Hit E, and then I can rotate, say 90 degrees. Let's try a negative 90 degrees. Now we have our bucket. It's simple, but it'll get the get the job done. So what we'll do here is take these two, do a mesh, and combine as well. Yeah, combine these as well. So mesh, combine. All right, and so that will make this. Change the name to cat arm. And then last but not least, we have this, which is just going to call be our ball or shot. All right, so the way that we want to have this thing animated is I'm going to take the cat arm, and to make it bend, what we need to do is use what's called a Binda Former. So if I go into the animation and go to the form, you'll see a whole list of things up through here. What we're looking for is under non-linear. It's called a Binda Former, and I'm going to attach it. And when I do, it's going to add this little beam and turn everything purple. So if we look, there's a line right here that has been created, and this is a handle. And so if we look at the channel box, we have a thing that says curvature, and bend 1, we have curvature, envelope, that kind of thing. And if we adjust the curvature, middle mouse button, you'll see that it'll wiggle and bend the object. Now, first problem that we're having here is we're bending it in the middle, and we're bending it sideways. So what we need to do is you take the handle here, and I'll hold down J, and I'm going to snap it at 9 degrees so it's bending everything back. All right. Second thing we need to do is we can adjust our high bound for how high that part is, and our low bound, which is going to be our bottom piece. So what I'm going to do is turn the low bound off down to 0, and if we go back to 4 again, you'll see that it's now got this little arrow here, this little line, and so I'm going to pull this down. Go to the side view here, it'll be a little easier to see. So pull this down to here, and if I want to adjust this a little bit, it'll change. You can see how it's changing sort of the shape, curvature of it. So leave it kind of in the middle. Got our high bend and our high bound. We can actually turn this up more. So what I want to end up doing is I don't want it to bend our bucket. All I want it to do is just bend the arm. So our bucket kind of stays nice and straight. And then I can adjust the curvature this way, right? And so what we can do is by keying this, we can create the sweep of the catapult arm. So what I'm going to do is we got our frames down here, and we'll start with a curvature of 0, so we're nice and vertical. And right click and just key selected. And let's take a little time, say, let's say you're 24 frames, and we'll pull our catapult back. Okay, something like that. And then we'll key selected, and then when it launches, it'll be pretty quick. We're going to have the catapult fly forward to the point that it's going to go a little overboard, right? And then key selected. So let's minimize our frames here a minute. So bring that down to say 60 is fine, and hit play. Okay, so now I've kind of got a start. Now what we need to have is we're going to need to change this so that we can create a sense of weight with the ball, velocity with the ball, and some recoil and secondary action going on here with the catapult arm. We're also going to need to create a little secondary action and adjust the timing, but we'll get there. So the first thing I want to do is go back to the start here. All right, so this is our start. Everything's nice and normal. Pull it up to say frame 24, and then let's come in with our little ball. We'll just kind of animate it, and so this would be kind of the point where it's going to kind of drop and sit in here, right? And what we can do, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and say, give me a new material. Lambert's just fine, and I'm going to change its color, something I can see. There you go. All right, so I'm just going to have to make sure this thing's set in here. Actually scale it down so it'll fit in the bucket. All right. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to worry about the translations for this guy. And key selected. And now this is where what we're going to do is say, okay, so here's where it gets flung, and so it's going to leave the bucket on its trajectory at this frame. So what we'll do is plug it in here like that, key selected, and then if you look, Maya's going to interpolate right through the middle here. So what we're going to probably need is one more key frame right here in the middle, and just set it kind of in the bucket, key selected. All right, so now we have a ball that magically appears, right? So instead of having it magically appear, set it frame 1, sort of like out of the frame, key selected, and then it's going to drop and head on out. And so if you notice, you already do have a little bit of a settling here, right? So what I might do is on frame 25, 26, because you need a little bit of a hold. So 24, 25, and then what I'm going to do is move it down just a slight, so we end up with this almost like a cupping, bracing moment, and then it's going to launch. And so what I'm actually going to do with the catapult arm here, this bend handle 1, curvature, I'm going to set another key. Okay. Now, how's this going to look in our animation? So let's go and look at our animation editors, graph editor, and you can see that our bend here has this nice curve to it. So let's zoom out so I can kind of see, keep both on screen at the same time. And so here is the pull down, and then what we were trying to create is sort of a little bit of a hold, right? So if I go 25, 26, say drops 25, 26, and move this one back, kind of flatten that down a little bit, okay? And then this is going to be one of those situations where all this needs to be accelerating. So instead of, as we see here, kind of slowing down, we want that to be a full speed. So I'm going to change that handle to linear. As a matter of fact, I can even make it a little more extreme, something like that. So now we have a real whip-like motion as it lets go. And of course, this needs to continue on for follow-through, and then it needs to kind of come back to settle. So almost like a ball bounce in a way. What we're going to want to have happen is if it launches at 35, say 36, 37, we'll push the curvature just a little bit further, key it, and then at say 38, 39, we're going to back it up just a little bit like that, key it, 40, 41, forward a little bit, key it, 42, 43, back, key it, 44, we'll go back to say neutral, so 0, curvature, key selected. All right, we can refine this a little bit, but what you'll see happen here is we almost have like a diving board, right? Kind of effect. So what I'm going to actually do is take this point here, and this will work because it's decelerating. Let's smooth those. I can still move the handle that way. Here we go. So it's going to speed up, and then after the ball is launched, it's going to kind of start braking itself because it will have extended past the vertical, and so it starts to slow down before it reverses, and then we have it kind of bounce back. So we have a moving, we'll start off slow pullback, kind of strain, and then a release, okay? And so from the beginning, pulls back, goes, right? All right, let's stop this. I'm going to head to the ball, and here we can see our translate Z, translate Y, translate X, which X shouldn't be even used, but because we're only keeping this on the 2 axis. But you can see how these frames are working. So what we're going to do here is kind of match these up. So in this case, ball's a little out of sorts here. So let's actually take the Z and move it back a little bit. So let me find out. That's where we're kind of entering. Line that up. All right, so down, down, down. And so that's going to be on the Y right here. And so this is where it kind of peters a little bit. So I'm just going to adjust that. Move forward to the next frame here. And you can kind of sink down maybe a little bit more. And then now we see where it's starting to launch and the arm hasn't launched yet. So right here, go ahead, pull this down, pull it back just a little bit, and then set those keys, and you see how that's going to be much more of a hold. Yep. Alright. And now we're going to have to just kind of match it. Some of it we can control with curves, but for some of this fast action, what needs to really happen with it is almost a frame by frame sort of matching, and that's okay. I mean, we kind of expect that with fast moving things, that you kind of have to key about every frame. Not quite free yet. There we go. Now it stops moving, so what we need to have now is say how far will this thing, how fast are we going, how far is this thing going to fling, and let's just go with our translate Z is kind of a rough estimate of how this curve looks. So let's just kind of smooth these things out a little bit. And so we can see that we have a curve heading this way. So let's go, say, here. And that means we'll go ahead and set a key. Almost got it right. So there we go. We'll just kind of continue this curve down a little bit, go to our Y, and it needs to kind of loft a little bit, right? So we can kind of shift these this way and that way, and we end up with a ball that's fly, right? 52. And here, I'm just going to go translate on the X and Z, key selected. And then this will, can again kind of come down here. And we'll let the Y kind of taper off. Auto, boom, boom. And then, so if we look at it from start to finish, here is our whoop, right? We could have it bounce or whatever we wanted to do after the fact. All right. So for just a little bit more secondary action, what we want to kind of do is have the actual cart of the catapult. Let's have it make like a rocking animation, okay? So what we're going to need to do is do a little bit of binding here, a little hierarchy, and come to the little cart. And here's my pivot point, and here's my arm, and I'm just going to middle mouse drag so that the arm is now parented to the base. So when I move one, it moves the other. And what we want to have happen is if I rotate this right now, it's going to rotate right on the center of mass. That's not going to be very realistic. But if I move this D key to this dot right here, which is the fulcrum of the center of weight, of the weight point, then we'll have it rock that way, right? And this one's fairly simple, but it's just kind of a neat little touch. So what I'm going to do is come back to the animation. Okay, we see it's got that, and then we'll start our shifts around here. So what I'm going to do is cat base, and let's figure out our rotation. So is it rotation X? Yes, it is rotation X. So rotate X 0. We're going to set a neutral key of 0 here. Okay, and then at full extension, which is frame 37, we will rock it. So we'll just kind of rock it forward a little bit like that. All right, so about 8 or 9. Key selected there. Let's see the curve we've got. And there's our maximum back. And what we'll do is we'll set this thing back to 0. Although actually, we're going to make it a little secondary. So set to 0, key selected. What will have happen is it will rock the whole cradle. Now what I'm wanting to do here is I want to make the secondary action. So instead of this actually sitting down at the moment this comes all the way back, we'll offset it 1 frame. Okay, so it'll be 0 instead of frame 39. There we go. Set it to frame 40. And what that'll do is just for a moment, this will be all the way back, but the rear wheel will not have sat down yet. So there's going to be an action-reaction kind of thing. It's subtle, but it adds a neat little touch. And so it sits, and then let's say, so that the next forward swing is at 41, so let's say at 42, we're going to rotate, what was that, -9? Yep, so we'll say -3. Very subtle. Key selected. And then say 44, she's on the ground, so 0. Key selected, hit F. And so you'll see that this kind of just does a little rocking thing. If you really want it to, kind of do the hit, what we can do is change those to angles here, so it's almost like just like the ball bounce, where it has a little reaction. And in all, the animation plays like this. Let's add a little motion blur to it. And there we go. Feel free to make a more elaborate catapult. Feel free to exaggerate or kind of characterize your catapult a little bit better. If you want to go and use your old catapult models, you're more than welcome to. But overall, it's just a quick example of how you can use not only a Binda Former, okay, in order to make objects bend, but also the start of secondary action and how it can help add weight and mass to objects.